Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the JavaScript Jabber podcast. This week on our panel we have Dan Shapir.
Hey, from a hot Tel Aviv.
AJ O'Neill.
Yo, coming at you live from a blistering Utah.
Steve Edwards.
Yo, just one yo for me. Coming from a formerly warm but now cooling down Portland.
Yeah. I was just outside, AJ. It's not terribly hot yet. It's going to be hot this afternoon. Yeah, but yeah, I'm also in Utah. I'm Charles Max Wood. We're talking to Ryan Dahl this week. And Ryan, I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro, and then you can tell me all the cool stuff that you've done that I don't mention. But you're largely credited with creating Node.js. I know other people have been involved in that, and you've moved on to also then create Deno. I think those are the kind of the big things that you're known for. Are there other things that people ought to be aware of, other than that you're a cool guy?
No, those I think those are the flagship things that I've done. Yep.
Awesome. So I'm just going to jump in. We're kind of doing this. We usually record on Mondays, and we're doing this out of band just so we could get you in and let people know about what's going on here. So Deno 2 is coming out, and I think that's kind of where we want to start. And you know, you sent us some material, but I'd kind of like to just let you explain some of this. You had Deno, and you know, Deno's been out for a while, and I know some people are using it and enjoying using it, but why did you need a Deno 2? Like, were there things that you weren't able to do in Deno 1 that you needed to do, or is it just like faster, better? And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, first there's Node, and I think you know, the idea that JavaScript is this language that everybody knows, and it's got a really great VM via Chrome, this V8 VM. And JavaScript is you know, Node was essentially ideating on how you could take this client-side programming language and attach it to servers. And the fact that when you click on a button and get a callback, it's pretty similar to a web server getting a request and getting a callback. And that event-driven programming is actually a pretty optimal way to structure servers. And Node, I guess it goes without saying these days, is pretty popular. So that project, you know, it's be used by I don't know, essentially every website, right? Like I'm certain we're recording this on StreamYard.com. It probably uses Node in some form or another. Almost all websites do it. It is in some ways the cornerstone of the internet. And that is largely because JavaScript is the default programming language and so important. It is not like Java. It is not like C. It is kind of intrinsic to humanity because so much of the world has been built on top of web browsers, right? You access your library through the web browser. You access your bank through the web browser. And this infrastructure is not going to change anytime soon. It's future-proof in a certain way. Like, I'm pretty sure we'll be using HTTP and CSS 5 years from now, if not 10 or 20 years from now. And CSS and HTTP are not dissimilar to JavaScript. They are protocols that make up the web. And so JavaScript is kind of future-proof in this way. And that is really the reason that Node has grown so big. I mean, Node was, you know, I think I did a pretty good job attaching a web server to JavaScript, but you know, ultimately, it's kind of the growth of JavaScript that drove Node's success. But you know, Node has.
If I can interrupt, because I have to ask about this before you move on to what came after Node. So you basically stated here like two big motivations for the creation of Node, and I'm kind of curious if any one of these two was the primary one when you like initially envisioned it. One was, as you said, using JavaScript, which is the cornerstone of the web on the server side. The other being the event model and the event loop and all this mechanism, and which, as you said, turned out to be such a great match for the server side. Like, a lot of people initially didn't expect that, and you had the foresight to see that it is such a great match. So I'm curious as to which one of these two was the primary motivation, or were they like equal?
It was the realization that those two complement each other that was the creation of Node. So a little bit before Node, like, let's say 2008, 2007, I was working on Nginx modules. Nginx is a kind of native web server that is written in C and is event driven. And at the time, driving event loops was kind of a unknown subject. Like, you had to be a real expert. You had to really know what you were doing to kind of drive ePOL in 2008. And I was aware that this was kind of the optimal way to drive web servers, as opposed to starting a thread per request. And I was, enthralled by this thing and looking for ways to make this easier and bring this to a larger audience of programmers. It was like literally like 100 people who knew about this, and maybe a bit more than that. But like, you just had to be this like an expert and part of some subculture to build an event-driven web server. And I was looking at different programming languages, originally Ruby, looking at Haskell for a little bit, looking at ways to kind of bind to drive web servers in an event-driven way and in a backed by ePOL on Linux. And inspired a lot by Twisted Python and Event Machine in Ruby. And the problem, looking at those things deeply, found that the big problem with those systems was that they interacted really poorly with the rest of the standard library. So if you take, say, Event Machine in Ruby, you realize that there's all sorts of blocking operations elsewhere in the Ruby stack. And if you take kind of non-blocking stuff and blocking stuff and just try to merge them all together, it ends in disaster, because the trick with event-driven web servers is you can never block the event loop. That's the principal thing that you have to do. And so you have to really build the system from the ground up to be non-blocking and event-driven. And I had the insight, maybe the singular insight in my life, that, oh my God, JavaScript, it offers the opportunity, because there is no defined standard library. There's no defined way of interacting with the operating system in 2008. There was no server-side JavaScript. This offers kind of a clean landscape for me to build up a pure event-driven web server and all of the associated libraries that you need to do that. So if you're making, say, an outbound TCP connection, you also have to drive that in a non-blocking way. Or if you're doing a timeout, you also need to you cannot block the event loop when you sleep for a couple of seconds, right? All of this needs to be event-driven. So this just works magically with JavaScript and makes all of this much more accessible to people. So I think the broad bent of what I'm trying to do is make, and I think this continues through Deno 1 and Deno 2, is trying to make programming accessible to people and allowing them to program pretty deep, important infrastructure, driving event-driven web servers and whatnot, with just a few lines of code and without necessarily understanding what is happening at the lower layers with ePOL and everything else that's going on. I think most Node users have no idea about any of those things, and that's great. It's a clean abstraction.
So I guess what I'm wondering then is, so you popped the hood on Deno 1 and you said, we're going to change out some of this stuff, right? We're gonna add some new features to the engine, or I don't know. This metaphor is going to get real weird in a minute, I guess. But you. So what I'm wondering is what's different between Deno 1 and Deno 2 that get you to this thing that you're trying to create?
Yeah. So okay, let me take a little step back and just introduce Deno a bit. So around 2019 or so, I've been working on other stuff. I haven't been working on Node, and kind of came back to Node, uh, and was starting to look at it deeply, and was really kind of disappointed about how I found the state of Node. Obviously, I follow it, like know that it's growing, but it did not feel like the clean, simple abstraction that I was going for. When you start adding all of these npm dependencies, you have like a 2 GB node modules folder. There's common JS everywhere. There's ECMAScript modules. The HTTP client in Node is different than the HTTP client in web browsers. It was just this kerfuffle that really disappointed me, because this is getting away from the goal of like, you don't need to know what's going on. You can just sit down and start programming, right? JavaScript is for the children. Like it should be easy for people to just start getting programming, start getting going. Also, on top of all of this, TypeScript was very clearly becoming a thing, and integrating TypeScript into your Node project required all of this setup and configuration files and builds, and it's just it starts making it not very nice to program in. And so started Deno with the idea to clean up a lot of this stuff with a kind of from the ground up runtime implementation, not in C++ like I did with Node, but in Rust, a new language. And really focus on making it TypeScript first, narrowing the gap between server-side JavaScript and web browser JavaScript, really using web standards, making it ECMAScript module first, making it batteries included, that is in having kind of a full tool chain of programming utilities that you need, because it's not just the execution of JavaScript. You also need code formatting and linting, and you need an LSP to connect to your editor, and the list goes on and on. Like, you really need a full tool chain of things. And in my mind, that is the runtime's obligation to provide those things. I really like how Go does things. It is all you need is Go, and it gives you everything that you need to get started. On
So
top
if
of
I
all of
can,
this,
if I can interject again, and I apologize for interrupting you. It seems that basis at what you're saying is that you had this great idea, but in certain ways it was kind of ahead of its time. You basically invented and created a lot of the ecosystem, and as the ecosystem evolved and matured, and introduced by force certain pieces that were missing at the time, like ECMAScript models just weren't available when you created Node, so you kind of had to invent common JS to create this module system. So and in a sense, you were kind of stuck with those inventions that you created, even though over time a lot of them turned out to be less than ideal. Is that a proper way of saying it? And like, Node can't change for the same reason that browsers can't change. I mean, a lot of us would be happy to go back maybe and change a lot of the various DOM APIs, but it's impossible because backward compatibility trumps everything else. You can't break the web. And likewise, you can't break the million applications that currently run on Node. But the big difference is that on the front end, the browsers are what they are. On the back end, you have the option of using maybe something else instead of Node. You're not breaking compatibility if you decide to use something else. So does that kind of paint the picture of why you kind of instigated Deno as like your certain a chance for a redo or retry, something like along these lines of, hey, I now have promises, I can do a wait, stuff like that?
I think of it in terms of like scaling limits. Like, Node just kind of reached this scale that, like, the Node has this kind of small core philosophy like the philosophy of Node, just kind of started breaking down at a certain scale. And it's unfair to say it's breaking down. I mean, like Node is the cornerstone of the internet, right? I mean, it's totally fine, but I think there is still an opportunity there. JavaScript is going to last many years from now. We are not at the end state. And like Node in 2019, I think it's unfair to look at it and say like, this is it. This is JavaScript for the rest of time. Like that is not the case. JavaScript is going to last many, many years in the future. In some ways, we're just at the beginning. And I think it is incumbent on us, if you care about this, if you're working in this ecosystem, to try to simplify it. And I think it can be simplified by addressing these problems at the runtime level. The comment about breaking changes is important. And I think that's one of the things with Deno 2 that we are reevaluating. I mean, Deno started out with very much a incompatible API and setup to Node, and we have found that to be nice in many ways, but kind of problematic at scale.
Yeah, I read a bunch about like the NPM compatibilities and some of the Node compatibilities and some of the things that we read leading into this. So how much of that is in Deno 2 and how much of that did you just wind up bolting into Deno 1 piece at a time?
I mean, Deno 2 is not like a hard break or anything. It is just more and more features kind of evolved into Deno 1. So I guess that's an important point to make is that like anybody who's written a Deno program, like that is going to continue to work. There's no breaking changes, so to speak, in Deno 2. What has been happening over the last 2 years is we started maybe 18 months ago, kind of started Node built-in APIs in Deno, the ability to import Node:/fs, for example, and be able to read files from there. And also NPM support, the ability to kind of pull in NPM packages, kind of in a nicer, more elegant way, we think, than in Node, where you kind of need a separate package manager and kind of install these things into Node modules. And in Deno, you can just reference NPM modules. You can do imports, npm:/choc or npm:/express, and it just kind of works. Like it kind of Deno itself is a package manager.
I have to ask about this because I recall when Deno 1 came out. Well, it was just Deno back then, not Deno 1. When Deno came out, one of the main selling points, and a lot of people kind of got all in a huff about it, was that it didn't actually have a package manager. It was, as I recall, it was you want something, you just downloaded it from the web. It arrives over HTTP. It gets cached, so you don't need to download each and every time, but it works just like your browser. You don't need a package manager. And now all of a sudden, turns out that you actually do need a package manager. So was your initial...
No, you don't need a package manager.
Okay. Correct me then.
We started with ECMAScript modules. The theory being ECMAScript modules is the real module system, not CommonJS, and that future JavaScript should be built on top of ESM. And ESM,
I love that, the real.
It is the real. I mean, it is literally specified in
oh
in
yeah,
standards,
I guess to that degree, yeah.
And it's real in the sense that browsers you cannot require in a browser, but you can import in a browser, and you can import HEP specifiers. You can import HEP : / blah blah blah. And kind of link to a JavaScript file in a browser. So that is the real module system in JavaScript. And so our thinking was, let's expose this to server-side JavaScript, and maybe this is sufficient maybe this is all you need. Maybe links is all you need. And we went pretty far with this. Our idea was like, if we build enough tooling around this and make this ergonomic enough that we could have kind of a decentralized module system where anybody can post code on any website and you can just link it into your projects. It's pretty great. It's pretty great for small scripts.
Why not Git? This is because it seemed like Go had solved this problem better than anyone else has ever solved it. And I think that Go modules had already existed by the time that Deno came out. So
very much inspired by Go.
Why not? That's because the talk I watched, it sounded like mathematically, from a graph perspective, the Go system is literally perfect. You cannot get better. You can get worse. You can make worse trade-offs, but you can't make better trade-offs.
We stick to the standards, so there is not a way to import a Git repository in the web browser, and so we were reluctant to add something that is not something that works in the browser, because the axiom that we have is that we want to narrow the gap between server-side JavaScript and browser JavaScript as much as possible. We want to have the same APIs. We want to have the same module system. And you can add that on there, but I think our original take with Deno was, let's just stick to HTTP specifiers and see how far we can get with that.
That makes sense.
I think we essentially have the answer now, a couple of years later, which is that it works for small scripts. It works really, really great if you're just scripting, hacking together a little build script or a little file manipulation tool or something. You have a single file, you can kind of throw in some HTTPS imports at the top. You can kind of publish these things. It doesn't work so well when you start having larger projects, multiple files, multiple packages. You're kind of having these URLs kind of strewn all over your code base. They don't necessarily, of course, a version string can be embedded in a URL, but without a real kind of semantic understanding of what versions of modules you have a lot of duplicated dependencies. You might have essentially the same dependency with like a slightly different patch version, slightly different URL kind of in your dependency tree.
Why not attack that at the standards body level? Because that seems like a problem that is universal enough, that has existed since the dawn of Unix. I mean, version numbers have been around, I think, certainly since people have had computers in their home. So why don't we have a standard at the web level, or attack that with one of those standards bodies?
I mean, there is essentially a standard for versions now, SemVer, and we do participate in the standards bodies, but standard bodies are also very, very slow moving and are not necessarily something that you don't want to standardize first and then implement. Like we are trying to build software for humans here and like actually solve problems. And so, only working in the standards body is, I attended TC39 a couple of times. I have to tell you, is the most boring thing I have ever done in my entire life. And just want to, it's like that. I'm trying to ship software that people can actually use. So yes, we do, Deno is a member of TC39 and we do interact with standards bodies, and we do try to make JavaScript better in that sense. But there's a pretty big gap between standards and implementation that allows for a lot of creativity.
I have some paint drying that you can watch. I kind of want to go back to the imports because you were talking about pulling in through HTTP, and you get the library or whatever you need, right? And it loads it in, and hopefully it's all set up properly for the module import. What's changed, right? I mean, I read the blog post about HTTP imports, and I think that's where you're headed here. So I don't know if you had something to finish on that thought, and then where are you going? Because I was pretty gratified to see import maps in there.
What's changed is that it just, like, first of all, it doesn't work at scale. Like, versions are a problem. We have the problem of servers going down. So if you have some dependency that has some other dependency that is hosted on, a personal home server, and that server goes away, then like the all the transitive dependence of that program, of that module, die along with the server. So there's a reliability problem. But I think the overarching problem is that when you're dealing in kind of bigger projects, you have problems like, hey, I need to use the AWS SDK. Like I need to talk to S3 or whatever. And we really don't want to be in a situation where you need to rewrite all of this software for Deno. And that gets very problematic at scale, right? I need to use gRPC, right? Like we cannot rewrite the world given all that has been done in JavaScript.
So this is actually one of my big questions, because it seems like Node fills a niche and it's really imperfect, but it's, that niche is full, and there's Deno and there's Bun, and I think there might have been another project that maybe is already burned out, but there's these projects that have major advantages over Node, but they're an incremental improvement. Node was a big bang, and the future advancements are like just another galaxy, right? So when you look at the ecosystem, I was actually really excited back when Deno was hard break, because I thought, great, this is a chance for us to get quality software that's been thoughtfully written, that's not just everybody who's ever touched a computer throwing something up on NPM. Because the stuff that's on NPM, 99% of it is garbage, and there's like that small percentage, and that's just the Pareto distribution. I'm not like trying to throw out a diss there. Like, most of the information in the world is wrong. Most of anything is going to tend towards the less useful, and the honed, the specific, the skilled. Like most athletes aren't Olympians. So for me, the idea that we were going to have a clean break from Node and we were going to be rebuilding the core pieces just clean was super exciting. And these seem to be in juxtaposition. You're saying, well, we need to rewrite the engine, but actually we don't need to rewrite the libraries. Where does that, how do those reconcile? Or why is that okay?
We added NPM support and Node built-in support to be able to pull in modules, including ones that use CommonJS and development patterns that we consider to be antiquated or deprecated. And there is, unfortunately, an enormous amount of complexity to be able to support CommonJS in an ECMAScript only world. But that doesn't change kind of the overall philosophy of Deno, which is to level up JavaScript. We don't allow our users to, say, use require or to do kind of poor development practices. We were really encouraging people to level up JavaScript. But being able to pull in gRPC from NPM is absolutely necessary when you need gRPC, because gRPC is freaking complicated, and like nobody's going to rewrite that. So in a sense, like a hard break is kind of nice until you realize that like there's a lot of infrastructure out there. The way that we can encourage people to have better development practices, to write clean code, is what we're doing on JSR, which is a new open source registry that is kind of a superset of NPM. Like you can depend on NPM modules in JSR, but we have something called the JSR score, where you get a higher score if you follow better development practices. So it kind of allows people to publish trashy code. And I agree with you, there's kind of a power law distribution in terms of quality of anything. And there's going to be a ton of crap out there. So there's a ton of packages on JSR that are going to have like a 0 JSR score. But we tell you how to improve this. Add JS docs to your exports. Use TypeScript. Use various things to kind of encourage people to up the quality of the code that they're distributing. Yeah, I think this is the right tactic. Like we need to have kind of stepping stones into the future. again, JavaScript is going to be here for many, many years, and the Node.js of 2019 is not the end state. Like I firmly believe that, because there's just too much economic pressure to make JavaScript better. So we need kind of ways to incrementally improve this. And as we were saying before, Node has all sorts of dependencies on existing software. It's very hard to fundamentally change how Node operates. It's effectively impossible. You can kind of tack on different things here and there, but you really need a project like Deno to kind of fundamentally think about these things differently. But that, it's not a kind of binary story. Like we have realized that we need to be able to pull in npm modules and be able to use, say, gRPC or the AWS SDK. Otherwise, people can't really develop real software in this thing. And again, we are not doing this as an academic exercise. We are trying to write software for real people.
So you said something. You said something that was really interesting to me. You said that effectively you can pull any existing npm module, which was obviously written or developed for Node, which means it uses Node practices, Node structures, Node APIs, etc. But
Yeah.
when I'm developing in Deno, I'm intentionally restricted to the Deno way, which is the better way.
Yeah,
So
I wouldn't
it
call
kind
it
of
the Deno
means
way.
that
I would call it the modern JavaScript way. Like we
modern
just kind of
Java,
encourage best practices. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's standards.
Yeah,
It's standards.
standards.
It's not Deno.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
not Deno specific.
Well, it's kind of more than standards, and I'll touch on that in a second, because there are certain things in Deno that I wish were part of the standard. Like I wish that the Deno quote unquote standard library was the JavaScript standard library. And my biggest complaint against the JavaScript language as it is that it's really lacking a standard library. And I would have loved for the Deno standard library to be the germ or the root of such a standard library. But going back to my previous question or point, was that I didn't is a point that I didn't understand or know before, is the fact that effectively you've created like two kind of distinct runtime environments with under one hood. There's like the dirty, scruffy environment that you need to support for the existing Node modules, and there's the cleaner, nicer environment where you write your own code. So you can the Node modules that you import can do things that you can't intentionally
Yes.
do. That's really interesting and something that I didn't realize.
So for example, the Node modules that you import might use CommonJS, of course, but they might also have like a process global. Process global is not a web standard, so we avoid having the process global in Deno. So in your kind of top level script that you're writing, although you might pull in express, which might very well call process env, the top level script will not be able to call process env without an explicit node : process import, if you're following.
So you've created a sort of node virtualization environment within Deno, and you're effectively running the node npm modules within that, again, quote unquote, node virtualization environment, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, virtualization environment suggests that it's virtualized in some sense. So I wouldn't call it that, but there is there's all sorts of kind of trickery that we do to make this kind of hidden from the user.
And how compatible is it? I mean, what level of compatibility were you able to achieve? I mean, it can't have been easy. Let's put it this way.
It was not easy. It took us a very long time, a lot of engineering effort. The level of compatibility is fantastic. It's very good. We've been working on this, like I said, for about 2 years now. There's always going to be a long tail of incompatibilities, and we consider any module that we can't run a bug, and we will fix it. But it's really, really good these days. So Deno can even import Node modules that have extension modules to them, like compiled extension modules that use NAPI, for example. So Deno implements all of the NAPI binding layers. It goes very deep, and it's our goal is let's call it 4 nines of compatibility or something. Like there's always going to be a tail of incompatibility, but it like essentially anything that you pull in should work out of the box in these days.
The big problem with projects like that, from my own experience, is that, like you said, like everybody uses this, like 90 something % of the modules that people use are essentially the same modules. Like there are certain small subset of modules that are the most popular by far. But the problem is that a lot of organizations use another module in addition to that. So the question always is am I not going to find myself stuck because some weird module that some developer that worked here 5 years ago imported, and I'm dependent on, and it does something really, really out there, and the environment has a problem with it. So,
I mean, it's always possible, but the compatibility layer happens at kind of the Node API boundary, right? Node has all of these built-in modules like FS API, and Deno implements these very, very deeply and well. And so I would expect even random side modules are going to work. But like I said, there's a long tail, and there will be incompatibilities. Yeah, I would encourage people to try it. You will be shocked. You can import essentially anything. You can take Next.js and create Next.js app and do Deno run dev in there, and this works, right? So Deno can take any package JSON Node first project and run this natively in Deno as well.
and the other question that I have is, again, one of the defining aspects of Deno when it came out was the security and the sandbox model. The fact that you're sandbox by default, and you open up certain aspects, and you only open up those aspects that you actually need. Well, again, my question then becomes, do you run into issues with that when you're using arbitrary node modules that have no concept of this security sandbox? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so haven't mentioned that, but that is indeed one of the kind of flagship things that we were trying to do with Deno is like the web browser and this goal of kind of narrowing the gap between server-side JavaScript and browser JavaScript. Browser JavaScript is super secure, right? You're running untrusted code day in and day out in every single tab. And the V8 VM provides a super secure sandbox for this. And in Node, we were more interested in what we could do rather than thinking too much about whether we should be doing it. No, we just I wasn't thinking about security back then. I was thinking more
You
about
were
web
about breaking
servers.
barriers. Let's put it this way.
Exactly. Yes. And I think now with some years to think back on that, I think being able to utilize the secure sandbox that V8 provides it should be mentioned. V8 is the real workhorse here behind Deno and Node, and in some ways you can think of Deno and Node as kind of if V8 is the Linux kernel, then Node and Deno are kind of like two Linux distributions, right? Two different distributions of V8. Anyway, we in Deno we do use the security of the V8 VM, and by default, when you run a program, whether it has npm modules or not, you have zero access to the system. You cannot make network connections. You cannot read from the file system. You cannot see environment variables. It doesn't matter if your npm dependencies or dependencies of dependencies call process env, whatever. All of that is gated in Deno. because again, we've re-implemented all of this. And so that extends to the NPM modules, and you are able to gate access at a pretty fine-grained layer in user space at the V8 level. And kind of say whether things are able to access, say, the file system, or if they're able to make outbound network connections or listen on a socket. All of that is controllable, and it does extend to the compatibility layer. It's a very nice aspect of the system. You kind of have to provide a few more flags, and it's a little slightly less ergonomic because, like, yeah, in many cases you do want to turn off the sandbox, right? If you're running, if you're writing a script, like it's probably going to interact with the file system. It's probably going to interact with the network. But there are many cases where maybe you're just writing a proxy server and you really don't need access to the file system at all. It's very nice to have that at your fingertips and be able to gate that access.
The cool thing about it, though, is so what I'm understanding from you is you can start fully sandboxed, open whatever features you need, then start using the various node modules. And then if something breaks because of security, because of the sandbox, and I assume that there's the appropriate notification for that, so you are aware that, this
Yep.
module tried to do something that it's not allowed to do, you can then decide whether or not, you actually need that module and are willing to grant that security aspect to it. And conversely, you might ask yourself, hey, why is module that's supposed to be doing networking want access to my file system? Maybe I should be more suspicious about what it's actually doing.
How do you guys feel about a screen share? I guess this is a podcast, so probably.
No, you can screen share we can do a quick screen share, but our listeners obviously are losing out.
I'll
They
do
can watch
descriptive reading.
Let me see if this works. Well, let me see. Can I share a window? Yes. Let me just pull up a terminal here.
AJ, I want descriptive singing.
Can you see this?
For those listening along at home, we can't see anything yet, but now it's a terminal.
Chuck, be careful what you ask for.
Right.
So let me just test.ts and let me just show you.
He's using Vim, by the way, not NeoVim like a noob. For those listening,
this is actually NeoVim, but whatever.
Yeah, the NVIM at the top was a dead giveaway.
He's aliased it as Vim like a professional, not like a noob, by the way.
Let's say we wanted to I'm console logging hello, and let's just say I want to make the background color red. Okay, and I think how you do this in Node, you often use the chalk library, so you can import chalk from, and in Deno you just do chalk. Okay, and then you can say something like chalk dot.
So it's npm : chalk to tell it that it's an npm module.
That's right. So you can do something like this. Hopefully this works. Deno test. And what you see here is that it says Deno requests environment access to force color. Chalk is reading environment variables. And so I can say
I like this.
No, and deny that. No, you can't read that. No, you can't read that. No, you can't read that. You can't read that. Can't read that, and it logs it not in color. Let me try this again with allow m or just -e to allow environment variables, and now chalk has operated correctly. So yeah, I mean, a really simple demo, of course, but it's chalk was not built for security sandboxes. Like, it knows nothing about this, but through our compatibility layer, we are gating access to the environment variables. And maybe you didn't know that chalk was actually accessing those things, and you decide that, hey, actually, I don't want to use chalk. I don't want to expose my environment variables. Let me do kind of the Deno first way of doing this, and in fact, the web standard way, by putting %C there and doing background color red is actually the web standard-y / Deno first way of doing this. This is how you do it in the browser. And now you don't need any control access. You can just use use the CSS directly here. Are you following me?
Yep.
Yeah, for those of you that are listening along, you can actually pass a CSS style as a string, the same way you would put it in HTML, as an argument in console.log to fill in a %C. So you can have a string with 3% Cs, and then you can add 3 styles.
As I recall, you can also do the same thing in the browser dev console.
Yeah. This is
yes.
We do not invent APIs, so this is not like a Deno-y thing to do. We're
yeah, but for those who are curious, the same way that you can use colors in your console logs inside the browsers work in Deno the exact same way. That's
right.
the basic.
Yeah, but I think the main point there is that like Chalk does read environment variables. Probably nobody knew that, but maybe you're sensitive to that. Maybe you have secrets in your environment variables, and maybe you don't want to allow access to that. Chalk's a pretty simple example, but this kind of extends to any NPM module, and so you can kind of see what these NPM modules are doing and decide specifically if you want to allow access to that. So yes, the security sandbox is still a primary thing in Deno, and we think pretty important.
What I really like about this is the fact that, we've been in the context of security, there's been a lot of talks about the security issues when people take control over existing projects and insert malware into them, kind of creating all sorts of supply chain issues. And the Deno approach is a very interesting safeguard against that, because if somebody introduces malware into an existing package to do something that it isn't supposed to do, there's a good chance that the existing sandbox could prevent it from actually doing that. And all of a sudden, you'll get that error and the thing won't work, but you haven't introduced a security vulnerability.
Yeah, it gets really problematic when it comes to like npm post install scripts. Like anytime you add a dependency, like any dependencies of that dependency are going to run their post install script. You're essentially in Node. Anytime you add a dependency, you are running untrusted code from random people on the internet on your computer without any sort of sandbox. Like it's very problematic.
Plug for Socket. I use Socket because I don't want to be running untrusted code from random people on the internet when I have client work and AWS keys and, that sort of thing. I forget what their website is. It's
Socket.dev.
Yeah. Socket.dev. Yeah. Socket. And that links in. I think they have GitHub actions that will link in on push to monitor your package JSON, as well as an alias for npm so that it hooks into the npm install and makes sure that malware doesn't run on your computer.
Yeah, and we did have Faraz on our show a while back. We should probably have him on again.
Episode 155.
I'm gonna change our direction just a little bit here, unless there's something else you want to add, Ryan, before I do that.
No, cool. Right.
So one of the other things that we're seeing come through is JSR, and so I wanted to talk about that for a bit too. Here we've already been going for 50 minutes, and I want to be mindful of your time. But yeah, it looks like an interesting project. Do you kind of want to set the stage for what it is and why you even created it?
Yeah, like post GitHub acquisition, npm is like not evolving at all, and
no,
as kind of the central place where you share JavaScript code. Like this is pretty unfortunate. Like JavaScript is a very vibrant world with all sorts of changes happening. We're moving to TypeScript, we're moving to ESM, and like the place where everybody is sharing code is effectively dead. There's all sorts of security problems, as we were just discussing. It's just it's not fun. Like, I'm sure everybody here has published an npm module. Have you tried publishing like something that's written in TypeScript? Have you dealt with CommonJS, ESM? Like, what sort of output do you have? How does the exports thing work? Like it just gets really complicated, and again, kind of gets away from this JavaScript being for the children. Like this should be a toy-like language. This is a scripting language. We are not programming in C++. Like it should be fun and nice, and the registry could be supporting us so much more here. And as I said when we were discussing HEP specifiers, we kind of have come around to this realization that a centralized registry is actually very important for reliability. You can't have things hosted on random servers. So we have created JSR. It is open source, unlike the NPM registry. It is meant to be a community service and is managed by me right now, effectively, in the Deno company. But we intended this to be a community service and open source and community driven. And it is just delightful to use. If you have ever published to NPM, you will immediately see the benefit. Like you can just publish your TypeScript; it just works. It is really meant for a world in which there are multiple JavaScript runtimes. The Node package manager is meant for a world in which there is Node. But in 2024, we've got Node, we've got Deno, we've got Bun, we've got Cloudflare workers, we've got the browsers, right? There's many different places where you're going to be running JavaScript, and it's important for a registry to support all of those targets that you might be writing JavaScript for. It's very important for it to support TypeScript. And we've just got all sorts of useful features in there that are attempting to level up JavaScript. And I think I mentioned earlier the JSR score, where we give you a kind of a point score for your package, and it's probably going to start off with 0% because most stuff is crap. That's fine, but in order to get towards 100% score on your JSR score, you have to implement things like having a description for your package, making sure that there's documentation for it.
Test coverage.
Test coverage is not one of the things that factors into the JSR score, because it's really hard to decide in general across multiple runtimes what sort of test coverage you have.
So one thing. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, suffice it to say that we put a lot of thought into JSR, and I really think this is where we should be having the vibrant sharing of code in the future. It's delightful to use.
So one thing that very much concerns me is that code should not be vibrant. Code should be dull and dead, right? And most of these registries, and all of them that I'm aware of, kind of play off of it's kind of like social media. And so the idea is to update and update and update. And so what ends up happening is that what's always on the homepage are the modules are the most insecure, the least well engineered, have the most bugs, because they're the modules that are just always changing or being written new and will never be finished. And then the code that is mature and stable, the code that you wish that you would find, ends up being at the bottom of the pile where you'll never find it. And then these modules that are just making constant changes are the ones that become popular, whereas the modules that are the diamonds in the rough that have 3 stars are the ones that are like, it's got full documentation, it's typed, that it's simple code.
I'm not sure I agree, AJ. I mean, people are still using Express, and Express is supposedly dead. So
okay. Once a module has carved out a niche, that it's game over, right? That people are always going to use that module forever. But I'm talking about the pattern of giving immature and buggy code priority because it's the code that's always being updated, as opposed to stable code that works well. Do you see that as a problem? And do you have a way to promote code that is stable over code that changes frequently or is new?
I also kind of disagree with the premise. I mean, I think,
okay.
In some sense, I agree with you that, like, people should strive to get their packages to a final state, and that the code should be boring and not interesting. But obviously, the the software stack of humanity is growing, and new things need to be developed, and they will need to be iterated on, and we need a place to share those things.
Yes, I agree with that. But for example, once you've implemented a JSON parser, you're done. Now, thankfully, a JSON parser is so boring, it gets to be in the standard library. But there are many things where once you've implemented them, they are done. If you are publishing updates, that should reflect negatively upon the package score, because you should not be publishing updates to something that can be complete. And having
there's
projects
different types of
where
software, right? Not everything's a
you're
JSON
kitchen
parser.
syncing. Yes, but if you're kitchen syncing something, if you're building a framework where every week you're adding a new feature and another feature and another feature and another feature, then you're just creating kitchen sink bloat, right?
Maybe. I mean, you may have a tool that's what people want. I mean, there are systems. I mean, take Ruby on Rails, for example. A lot of people love working in it, and it kind of kitchen sinks stuff, and they keep adding things to it that do more jobs. So, I mean,
Yeah,
the web standard is changing all the time,
you probably
and
don't
Ruby
want
has to adapt to that.
You probably don't want the kitchen sink a logging library, and we saw where
Right.
that leads when that happens. But you probably do want to kitchen sink something like Next.js maybe, or Ruby on Rails. It kind of depends on where you are.
I'm just saying that curating this in that way is a huge job. And it doesn't sound like Ryan and the other folks at Deno are necessarily, I mean, they see some of the problems, I'm sure, but I don't know if they're interested in solving that problem.
I'm saying heuristically, not always favoring the things that are buggy and changing constantly, having some, just not giving superpowers to the people that are just publishing weekly. And I'm sure so many companies
but are you
aware of this
suggesting
and
that
just do update hacking.
Like publishing should be hard so that you can't change it? Like I don't think things should be unnecessarily hard.
No. I'm saying giving. So, for example, you go on your website, packages, recently updated, new.
I see.
I don't want packages that are being updated all the time, and I probably don't want packages that are being new unless they're pretty close to completion.
Right, but I mean, that's just something for the homepage. I don't think this is the primary mechanism for finding stuff. I mean,
what is the primary mechanism for finding stuff? Because it seems to me like for an NPM, the primary mechanism for finding stuff is Google. So
yeah, and I think the same is true for JSR. I mean, we do have a search there. I wouldn't call it perfect yet, and the JSR score that I mentioned, which again encourages boring coding practices, like just have some docs, like factors into the search results. But like ultimately, like a registry is going to have lots and lots of stuff on it, and you're not going to necessarily like find a list of all the things that are on the pack. Like you can't have a list of all the things on NPM and scroll through it and find it. It doesn't matter whether it's sorted by new or not. You're going to find it
does
through
in
word
terms
of
of search engine optimization, right? Like if you want to hack the system, you can just publish updates. You can just bump the minor version and basically do nothing, and it'll show up on the homepage. Google ranks the NPM homepage higher than it ranks other pages on the internet, right? So there is, and you're publishing, I'm sure you have, whether it's an XML feed or whether it's, some sort of JSON feed, but I assume there's something that you're publishing where you're probably putting out to search engines and whatnot, and things that the things that are updated frequently are the things that are going to get the highest
I see. So
they're going to get the benefit.
That's a reasonable point.
Over things that are
you're worried that the kind of new, recently updated column on the JSR homepage like impacts the SEO of like crappy packages. I mean, okay, sure.
I'd like to pull us back to, before we finish, I'd like to bring up another another topic that you mentioned several times, and it's also interesting because Node recently did a change regarding that as well, which is TypeScript support. I mean, like
Hey,
the big one of the biggest things. Sorry, Chuck, you want to say something?
Fun and easy
I
and
just wanted-
TypeScript in the same.
Well, I wanted to just ask one other question about JSR
Oh,
here real quick.
Go for it.
I mean, because we were talking about the quality of the packages and things like that, but my question is how do you use it, right? Is it the import maps and the imports like we're talking about before? Is there a I was going to say CLI, but a command line interface for those who aren't TLA 3-letter acronym savvy? And is it only for publishing? Is it for pulling them into my prep? Yeah, how does this all kind of hang together so that I can go, okay, JSR looks to me better in some cases than NPM.
It is better than NPM in every situation. I guarantee you. It is fantastic. You can use this. So if you're using Deno, it's like we have native support for JSR. So you can just do import JSR : your package, just like you can do import npm : your package, right? It's a URL in the system. So Deno has native support for this, and you can, of course, put JSR specifiers into your import maps and turn them into bear specifiers if you know what those words mean. If you're using Node or Bun, you can use the npm compatibility layer. Like behind the scenes, all of these packages are actually exposed as an npm registry, npm.jsr.io. And you can add them to your package JSON. So there is really great docs on JSR, and I'll just drop you a link here. But on each of the package pages, you should see like a little usage statement, and it will tell you the commands to run to add it to your package JSON. But yeah, the support gets really, really good when it comes to Deno, where it all is super smooth and requires no extra commands.
Awesome. Yeah, I just put that into the comments on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch as well, so people can find it if you're watching there. And we'll try and get it in the show notes as well. But yeah, that was what I wanted to know is, hey, it looks like a great experience. So yeah. And this is ready now, right? This isn't something you're announcing and saying, hey, try it in a couple weeks. It's out there.
It's
right?
it's done and done. No, we're still iterating on it, but I think it is like 99% done. Like it's working. It's fantastic.
Well, if I understood correctly, Deno 2 is just an iteration. It's like Deno 1.87, but at some point you just need to go to 2, right? Or it sounds like there's a few milestones, but it's not.
That's right.
It's not a rewrite.
I mean, it's not a rewrite, and the main thing is that this npm support is really, at 4 nines of completeness. It's like complete. You have this option of JSR available to you if you want to have the leveled up version of npm. Yeah, I think it's, there's other aspects of this that we haven't gotten into, like the long-term support. Deno is very stable at this point. We are not changing anything. We're introducing long-term support in Deno 2. And we also have workspaces in Deno 2. But that, it's kind of getting, Deno 2 is about scaling up projects to relatively large code bases, where I think Deno started with like really great for single files, and what we're trying to do is keep Deno great for single files, but make sure that it scales up to projects that have 100,000 lines of JavaScript in it. And that includes the npm support, that includes JSR, that means the long-term support, and workspaces all kind of factor into this like scaling up of Deno.
So I would really like to sneak in one or maybe two things before we wrap up. Let's see if we manage it. So the one of them I started to mention was the TypeScript support. Like as you said initially, you in a kind of similar way to how you recognized early on the role that JavaScript could and should play on the server side, you realize early on that the market was heading towards TypeScript. And in fact, like I think the majority of JavaScript code in the enterprise is actually TypeScript. and you introduced like built-in support like from the get-go. Interestingly, now Node has just introduced a sort of a support for TypeScript as well by effectively stripping out all of the type information, essentially treating it like comments and running what's left. Is that similar to what you do, or do you do something different?
It's similar to what we do. Yeah, when you run TypeScript in Deno, very nice attribute of TypeScript is that it's a super cheap operation to transpile that into JavaScript. You don't really have to understand the types, you just strip them out. And that's how Deno runs things. Deno also has the type checker, the TypeScript type checker in it. So if you run Deno check, it will check your types. And the TypeScript is kind of fully baked in through the system, through the linter, through JSR. Deno tries very hard to make it so you don't need to write any configuration files. No TS config necessary. So the TypeScript goes much deeper in Deno, but yeah, indeed, Node is picking up on some of the features of Deno.
So
Experimental support
essentially,
in Node.
so because you're effectively just stripping out the TypeScript, you really don't care about the TypeScript configuration, because I think it was Matteo Collina, who you probably know, once said that TypeScript is not a language, it's a universe of languages, because you could really specify what kind of language it is via your TS config. And there's certainly truth in that. You can really modify the way that TypeScript as a language works. But I guess that if you're just stripping out the types and effectively just ignoring them, then it all boils down to the exact same thing.
There's a bit to unpack there. So first of all, Deno does not just strip types. Deno understands the types deeply. Deno has deep TypeScript support in it, as does JSR. Like this TypeScript support goes very deep in the system. So much more so than just stripping types. It's true that you can configure TypeScript in different ways, and TypeScripts with different configuration, code bases with different configurations can be incompatible with each other. We strongly believe that TypeScript should move to a single configuration, single language world where you can actually distribute TypeScript as the primary code, not the TypeScript JavaScript. And that is one of the main features of JSR. You literally write the TypeScript and distribute the TypeScript, because we believe that runtimes like Deno and Node in the future will be able to understand that TypeScript directly. And so we believe in linking TypeScript together and having a single configuration. And I think a lot of people might think that there's a world of possibilities, and all of these possibilities, there is a world of possibilities with TypeScript. You can set all sorts of things, but not all of those possibilities are equally ranked. Okay, there is a good way to configure TypeScript, and Deno pushes you towards that configuration, as does JSR. That's part of the JSR score. So we encourage the default best practices in TypeScript, and we encourage using TypeScript as a primary language and distributing TypeScript and linking TypeScript to TypeScript, and not introducing always this compile step. I think this is unnecessary complication, because ultimately the code that people are writing is TypeScript, and having this kind of intermediate compilation step and linking step it creates complications for people.
Yeah, but the compilation step also serves a certain purpose, I think, because at the end of the day, TypeScript is not about runtime type checking. It's about development time type checking and compile time type checking. If you're taking away the compilation, you're also negating effectively the compile time type checking. You kind of want a certain middle step, don't you?
No, Deno has Deno check subcommand that runs the type checking. It's effectively like a lint, right, on your so you'll when you're developing, of course, you'll see this in your LSP. You'll see red squigglies and the TypeScript TSC kind of running in the background. But also during, when you push to CI or whatever, you should also be running Deno check, which is effectively TSC, and check those types, and you should get errors if those types are not correct. So there's no compilation step. You're still
So
distributing
no
TypeScript,
compilation, linting instead of compilation, basically, is what you're saying. You're not
yes.
getting rid of a step, but you're replacing a compilation step with a linting step.
Yes.
So if I'm running a step anyway, what's the benefit of linting over linting in compilation? Why not do the compilation ahead of time instead
think
of
about
just
what
in time?
happens. Think about what happens when you write a TypeScript module and you distributed this to npm. Think about what you have to think about the type stripping, and you need to build a build process to create JavaScript, and you need to think about the output of that. So you need to generate some code, right? You need to run TSC and create a dist folder and have kind of the TypeScript JavaScript outputted into that folder. You have to think about what flavor of JavaScript you have. That is all not abstracted away from you, right? In Deno, in JSR, that is completely gone. You do not think about that. You don't even know about that. If you're a user, all you are using is TypeScript. So yes, in your CI script, you still have one line that says Deno check, and that effectively does your type checking for you. But there's a whole bunch of complication that is completely alleviated from you. And I think as a user, when you go to use JSR, you probably are not even aware of this. And the overall vibe that you get is just like, holy shit, I did not realize this could be so simple. Because you're not necessarily, it's not going to be like kind of a conscious, not everybody's thinking about their dist folder and the distribution of JavaScript all of the time, right? These are effectively internal details that have been, because NPM is not evolving, are exposed to users. And when you go to a system like JSR or Deno, where we kind of deal with TypeScript natively, the end effect, the vibe for the everyday programmer is just, holy shit, this is crazy simple. I didn't realize it could be this nice.
Cool, makes sense. Now, I don't know if we have time to touch on that, but my second question was about, it seems that one place where Deno has been really successful compared to Node, and apparently more appropriate, is in edge computing. Is that correct? I seem to recall that.
Ooh, getting edgy.
Deno is Node is bigger
Sorry,
than Deno
Steve.
in every respect. So
including
Deno
memory
is
and processing time.
No. Well, sorry, I got it reversed. Yes, that is correct. Yes, Deno, the company, I think what you're alluding to, has an edge compute commercial service called Deno Deploy and Deno Subhosting. And yes, we this is how we make money. We provide services around edge compute.
Well, we've heard of other companies using Deno because of its better performance characteristics as we've interviewed other people. So I think that's where our bias leans toward what we've heard from other people on the show and whatnot. Or is that
generally performance is better in Deno. It is we spend a lot of time to make it great.
What do you have? This might be faux pas. Bun. What about Bun?
Bun is was there a joke there? Bun is a re-implementation of Node that is trying to outperform it. So I think they've done some nice ergonomic moves. They're also kind of building the package manager into the runtime, which I agree with. I think that's a good step, and also taking on kind of this TypeScript type stripping feature from Deno. But basically have the idea that yeah, 2019 JavaScript is the end state, and all we need to do is make this faster. And I fundamentally disagree with this. I think there is really something to level up here and improve on. I do not think we should continue to use CommonJS require indefinitely. So I think Bun in many ways is trying to do Deno, but maybe learning from our mistakes. They very aptly are focusing on node compatibility, but yeah, to what end? Why rewrite Node exactly? That's always my question. I think rewriting
Zig,
Node
man,
in
Zig.
Rust. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's fun. Ultimately, that's not what I'm trying to do here with Deno is rewrite Node in Rust. We are trying to level up
Right.
JavaScript and make this stuff fundamentally simpler for developers. Performance-wise, I find the benchmarks that they have at the top, above their fold on their website are not wrong, but they are cherry-picked. The performance situation with Deno is fantastic, and Deno outperforms Bun in all sorts of circumstances in many of the ways that matter more. For example, if you want to, if you're running on AWS Lambda and you're concerned about your primary concern is not necessarily about hello world throughput, which is the benchmark that they have up on their page, but cold
Agreed.
start
It's a little
latency.
unfair.
Actually, it's very cherry picked, and I think with a system, JavaScript runtimes have all sorts of functionality that there's thousands of APIs that have been implemented. Performance changes all across the board here. But I think if you look at the overall picture, the performance situation is vastly overstated in above the fold on Bun's website. And yeah, I think generally have the goal of re-implementing Node. Yeah, that's I guess a goal, but not what I'm trying to do. We are trying to level up JavaScript and kind of build the JavaScript for the next 20 years.
That was an excellent line to end on.
Yeah. Good stuff.
By the way, to answer your question, the rim shot was because you mentioned the magic word pun. So I just had to throw that in.
I see. Got it.
Something about pun and bun. And I was like, okay, that deserves one right there.
All right. Well, let's do picks. Dan, you want to start us with picks?
If I mute myself, it would be helpful. This is the second show that I'm recording in 1 week. So I'll excuse myself and say that I'm all picked out and move on to the next person.
All right. AJ, what are your picks?
So I tried Swift and I have not had enough time with it to give a true take, but I like it. I have this problem with Mac OS as they introduce these permissions and the tools that I used to have that work, they kind of stop working or new bugs get introduced as they're changing out all those permission models. And one thing that's been happening lately is my network drives become unmounted. And then when my computer wakes up, they're not remounted. And so I wanted to create something that would listen for the unlock event and then mount my network drives. And it ended up being that the demo code was 10 lines of Swift. And then I expanded that out because I wanted to make it like a normal project with command line arguments and, this stuff that I typically do and kind of get a feel for it. And I really, really like it. It's kind of, to me, it kind of feels almost on par with Go in some respects. I don't think that they're maybe as thoughtful and deliberate in the way that they present APIs as Go is, but it is very explicit. And there's enough training examples that as a person who had never touched Swift before, I was able to use GPT to pretty much, be the code assist, my primary code assist in creating my program, which ended up being more than 10 lines. It's more like 100 because of the like I said, there was some arguments parsing and some other stuff and me just playing around. But yeah, so I'm gonna pick Apple's Swift. It seems to be a really solid language, and I don't know. I have it. It's different. It actually reminds me more of PowerShell than of anything else, which that sounds like a diss, but it's not. PowerShell is probably one of the best things that Microsoft has ever turned out. PowerShell is incredibly well engineered and thought out. It has a different paradigm. It's actually a much more functional paradigm, but and it doesn't have a concept of standard in and standard out as much as it has a concept of pipes and streams. And so it's not just standard in and standard out. I think you can have an arbitrary number of streams, but they're kind of functional in the way that they work, almost like channels in Go or something. I don't know quite how to explain, but anyway, Swift is a pick for me. And then
before you move on, it just what you said about GPT just occurred to me that we had totally forgot to ask Ryan which ML model are you going to be building into Deno?
Yeah. What's your AI strategy for the future?
I really, doing a startup like that question gets asked unironically very often. So,
oh, I know.
Yeah, our technology is pretty orthogonal to this. But if you go back and kind of look at some of my stuff, Deno actually started out as a TensorFlow plus Node project. I was coming out of Google Brain and wanting to do ML models in JavaScript. And we haven't touched on kind of the Jupyter Notebook support in Deno, but I guess suffice it to say that I think data science and statistics and stuff in JavaScript is a thing that will happen in the future. And although I'm primarily working on the module system and kind of getting the runtime up and running right now, I have dreams of kind of stealing statistics away from Python and scientific computing and making this work in JavaScript really nicely.
I love the idea. To be honest, I've been thinking for a while that I would love to see something like that in a language that I find more approachable, right? So, for me, that's Ruby and JavaScript. But, yeah, just having those capabilities in these hands. And I think especially JavaScript with the reach that it has, I mean, that would be amazing. So I'm all on board with that. AJ, did you get all your picks out?
One more. I think I'm gonna have to switch my browser screenshotting service from running with Bun to running with Deno. So I'm just testing it right now. It worked. I was able to just change 2 lines of code. What process.exit was one of them, but now it's not closing. I'll figure that out. But yeah, so I guess I'm a Deno fanboy again. Ryan, I've had some things to say in the past. So
what?
You?
I am shocked.
Between as this cycle has gone from Node and Deno and Bun, I was on the Deno train for a while, but I was really frustrated with some stuff, and then I was on the Bun train. So I'm JavaScript fluid.
All right.
All good. We're trying to figure it out. Hopefully you have a nice experience with Deno in the future.
Well, it's going to improve my my performance on opening up a binary to run Chrome to do a screenshot. So,
all right. I'm going to jump in and derail us back to Steve. Steve, what are your picks?
Okay, Ryan, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the high point of all our podcasts is my dad jokes. So hence my name, Dad Joker. So, wait a minute. Okay. Supposedly, 30% of the world's population lets their pets sleep in bed with them. I'm really upset, though, because I tried it yesterday and now my goldfish is dead. Now, the other day, I learned that Albert Einstein was a real person. But this whole time, I thought he was a theoretical physicist. And then
I liked it. That was so good.
They don't get better.
That was the best one you've had in ages. That was the best one.
That's a pretty high bar. And then last night I saw this breaking news story that during the day, Count Chocula, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and the Teddy Grahams bear all perished in a fire. And they said s'more at 11.
What your joke about Einstein reminded me of a dad joke about this young physics student who's at a party and he's dancing with some girl trying to pick her up, and he says, Einstein, Newton's dead, Einstein's dead, and I'm not feeling so well this evening. I guess that didn't land.
I'll give you a rim shot anyway for the effort. That's all I have, Chuck.
All right. I guess it's my turn for picks. So I'll jump in with, I always do a board game pick. I don't know if I did this last week or earlier this week. So I'm just going to pick it. And if you get it twice in a row, I am sorry. I'm going to pick Challengers. It's a game. It's kind of a mix between Capture the Flag and War. It's a relatively fast game. You play 7 rounds. Whoever has the most points at the end of 7 rounds, the 2 top people go head to head, and whoever wins that one wins. And effectively, it's a deck building game, or kind of. So you draft cards. You can put 2 cards into your hand, or 1 higher level card on some rounds into your hand. You're building out your deck, and then you flip the cards over, and they have different abilities. And so anyway, sometimes they stack nicely, and essentially there's I can't remember what the zone is on the side of the playing field, but you can stack up to 6 types of cards on the side. So if you run out of room there, your opponent wins. If you run out of cards, your opponent wins the round, and then they get a trophy that has the points on it. So the gameplay is relatively simple. It's just knowing how to get the cards to synergize is the game you're really playing. And then knowing when to pull things in and out of your hands so that you don't bust on putting stuff in onto your bench, right, and running out of room there. So it's a terrific game. I think Board Game Geek rates it at 2 something. I didn't look it up. But it's super fun. It plays up to 8 people. That's the other thing that I like about it, is that usually you get a board game and it'll play 4. Sometimes it'll play 5 or 6. Challengers plays up to 8. And everybody gets a card that just shows you where to sit next so that you're playing. And yeah, the board game weight is 1.78. So it's pretty approachable. I think my 8-year-old could play it. I don't know that she'd really do well with the deck building piece, right? Put all these together, to have a mighty hand. But I think she could, to a certain degree, know, I really like these cards, or pick the higher number cards so that you can win the flag back. So anyway, I'm going to pick that. Came out in 2022. I played it at the Game Board Conference up in Layton, and it was awesome. So anyway,
is it good for 2 players?
Yes, you can play it with 2 players. It is probably better with 4, 6, or 8 players. If you have an odd number of players, there's a robot deck that gets progressively harder as each round goes by, because it's got things like this card is worth whatever round you're on, or however many fans, which is the points you have, or things like that. So it's kind of set up to kind of match your hand, but you play both hands when you're playing against the robot. So if you can play with odd number of players too, is what I'm saying. But yeah, it's typically better if you have at least 4, and that's just because then you get to switch up who you're playing against. But you can definitely play a 2-player.
Yeah, sounds cool.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So I'll put the Board Game Geek link in here, and then I'll go find an Amazon affiliate link here in a minute. And then other picks. There was an article that came, or not an article, but a blog post that DHH put out, basically talking about free speech. And essentially what he was saying is that people have the right to say things, even if they're offensive, even if they're awful, even if they're full of crap. He didn't say full of crap. He said something. He used a word I'm not going to use on the podcast, but but you have the right to say what you're going to say. And I like the idea of that, just from the standpoint of, hey, look, at least I know who you are, right? And I think most people are smart enough to figure out, yeah, you're saying this and you really are full of crap. So, but he was responding mostly to the stuff where they're sentencing people to like 20 months in jail for posting something to social media that's offensive in England. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, just
very true. I've seen the videos.
Yeah, the thing that, and you see this in the United States too, and it's cherry picked examples, but they gave an example of like a man essayed a woman and got 6 months, but a person who posted something mean on Twitter got 20 months.
Yeah,
it's problematic because unless it's very easy to get specific cases wrong if you don't know the details. Like on the one hand, it's obviously free speech, and we're all in favor of free speech. But then turns out that incitement was made. So it's
okay.
it's like if you say go out and kill all such and such people.
right.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm saying that you should have the full context before making judgment. I tend to reserve my judgment until I have as much
Unless it was
context
a mob boss with a coordinated attack, it doesn't matter if on Twitter you say go kill someone. I mean,
No,
if it was the leader of a terrorist organization, that's one thing.
Yeah,
if it's some Joe Blow,
but in some countries it is.
I didn't mean to open this can of worms, but I will say that
again, I'm not
More like
making
a
a
huge
moral
bucket.
judgment. I'm just saying that in some countries have different laws regarding free speech than the U.S. does, and you should be cognizant of that.
Yeah, I recognize that. I think the issue that he's pointing out, and he didn't go into like incitement and stuff, right? He was just saying, hey, look, you should be able to say wrong things, and that I agree with, right? Yeah, down to incitement. If you're encouraging people to go out and hurt other people, obviously that's a real problem. But if you're expressing your opinion, you can express bad opinions. Anyway, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to pick. I have an AI summit that I'm putting together in October, so keep an eye out for that. Other than that, Ryan, what are your picks?
I really like grain.com. This is some tool that helps you record meetings. And Deno is a company. Deno has is remote, and we have meetings with people, and yeah, Grain just helps you record it and makes a transcript of it. And I find it just super useful to it's just got a great interface. So pretty simple tool, but and I'm sure there's probably other ones, but I've been finding a lot of utility from Grain.
Awesome. All right, one last thing, and we should have asked this way earlier, but if people want to see more information about Deno 2, or if they want to reach out to you and say, hey, I like this or I don't like that, how do they find you?
Yeah, I'm rough underscore C on Twitter, with Deno underscore land on Twitter, and Deno.com on the webs. And yeah, there's a Discord. You can find my email if you search hard enough. So yeah, feel free.
What happened to Rye?
Rye, the Twitter handle, or what?
Yeah, well, I thought you were Rye. Were you not Rye?
I was Raya with an H in 2010, but yeah, I stopped using Twitter for a number of years and just came back a couple of months ago.
Well, I'm sorry for your mental health. I'll offer you some aspirin if you need it.
It's fun being on Twitter these days. Yeah, back in the Node days, it was very noisy.
Oh, I'll bet.
That explains that explains the shockingly low number of followers you have.
Yeah,
Yeah. By the way, Chuck, did you give Ryan the chance to do picks?
I did.
Yeah.
He picked grain.co.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Sorry.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for coming, Ryan. And thanks to your team. They've done an excellent job kind of keeping us informed so we could do this.
And thanks for making such a huge difference to the web. I consider the web to be like maybe one of the greatest achievements of humanity of all time. And I think that, you know, you and the Deno team, but even you personally, have made a significant impact on that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can take credit for the web, but I can take credit for Node, which, yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was fun.
And thank you for the reminder of the Flintstones every time I hear the name.
All right. Till next time, folks. Max out.
Bye.
Adios.